Nezuko Kamado isn't just Tanjiro's sister. Her transformation into a demon is the emotional core of Demon Slayer, and the whole reason Tanjiro embarks on his journey in the first place. But what if the night where the Demon King attacked the Kamado household went differently? In today's video, we'll explore what would happen if Muzan Kibutsuji killed Nezuko in episode 1 of Demon Slayer. The way our story begins is pretty simple. Everything follows the original timeline, but when Muzan injects Nezuko with his blood, she doesn't survive the transformation. So when Tanjiro returns, he finds only utter carnage, and realizes that in that moment, he's all alone in the world. Now this story splits into two very different paths, depending on one crucial decision. Does Tanjiro become a Demon Slayer at all? Let's start with the darkest timeline, where Tanjiro's grief is completely overwhelming, and when Giyu arrives, he only sees a completely broken teenage boy. In the original timeline, Tanjiro was desperately fighting off Nezuko at first, and then tried to protect her from Giyu with just an axe. The reason Giyu was so impressed was because Tanjiro nearly succeeded in outsmarting the Water Hashira, and having a demon that hadn't killed a single human was an amazing find. But none of those factors are at play in this timeline, so Giyu would assess the situation, realize there's nothing he can do here, and move on to continue his mission. After all, why would he recruit a grieving civilian with no connection to the Demon Slayer world? Without Giyu's intervention and Urokodaki's guidance, Tanjiro would be left to bury his family alone and somehow try to rebuild his shattered life. The most likely outcome here is that Tanjiro returns to selling charcoal, but he'd be a completely different person. Tanjiro would be traumatized and forever changed by that night, meaning he would move away from the mountain to escape the nightmares. Maybe Tanjiro recovers from the trauma somewhere down the line and settles down with a family of his own, but we can be sure that he never joins the Demon Slayers. But the consequences of this timeline extend far beyond Tanjiro's personal tragedy. Without Tanjiro and the Demon Slayer core, there would be no sun-breathing users. And additionally, once Nezuko is dead, we never see a demon that can survive the sun. If you remember the Asakusa arc, you'll realize that Nezuko's transformation into a demon was the reason Tamayo began working on her human transformation drug. But in this timeline, the development of the drug is postponed, meaning that she won't have a potent poison ready for the final battle against Muzan. However, since Muzan never sees a Demon Slayer with Hanafuda earrings, and never detects Nezuko being immune to the sun, we can conclude that he'll probably be less aggressive in this version of events. But what about the other Demon Slayers in the main cast? Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Kanao would still pass the final selection, but without Tanjiro, they'd all go their separate ways. Zenitsu actually might not last long as a solo Demon Slayer, given his cowardly nature, and while he won't get killed, he might be forcibly discharged from the Corps for deserting them on missions. Meanwhile, Inosuke's recklessness could get him killed without Tanjiro's restraining influence, and the Mugen train arc is probably where this would happen. Kyojiro Rengoku would board the train with Zenitsu, Inosuke, and some other low-ranked Demon Slayers who couldn't match Tanjiro's abilities. Rengoku would be overwhelmed trying to protect everyone, and while he might still defeat Enmu eventually, he'd be far more exhausted when Akaza arrives. But even if Zenitsu and Inosuke survive until the Entertainment District arc, their journey definitely ends here. Tengen needs Demon Slayers he can trust for infiltration, and without the Kamado siblings, he'd have to rely on other core members. Tanjiro awakened his Demon Slayer mark to behead Gyutaro in this arc, and Nezuko's burning blood was the key to healing the poison from his blood sickles. This means that the Demon Slayers suffer a devastating loss, and the Upper Moon 6 would remain active somewhere else after the Entertainment District is destroyed. Muzan would probably still locate the Swordsmith village, and launch an assault on it to deal the Demon Slayers another setback, and this time they'll be totally defenseless. Mitsuri needed her Demon Slayer mark to hold off Zohakuten, and Muichiro was trapped in Gyoko's blood demon art and drowning to death when he activated his mark state. But the Demon Slayers can only awaken their mark if they've been in the presence of a marked sun-breathing user, so without Tanjiro, both Mitsuri and Muichiro are killed in battle. From this point onward, there's really no need for Muzan to summon all the Demon Slayers to the Infinity Castle, but if he does, it'll just be a straight massacre. Gyoko, Hantengu, Daki, and Gyutaro are all alive, meaning that the Hashira would be outnumbered and overwhelmed. The final result is that Muzan would win and humanity would fall into an age of darkness dominated by demons. But what if Giyu still recruited Tanjiro despite Nezuko's death? This timeline is more hopeful than the last one, and also pretty interesting. In this alternate timeline, Tanjiro's grief takes a back seat when he sees his family, and instead he flies into a blind rage. Tanjiro actually attacks Giyu, thinking he must be responsible for the carnage, and the Water Hashira decides that this anger could forge a powerful Demon Slayer if properly channeled. Giyu sends Tanjiro to train under Urokodaki, but the Tanjiro who climbs Mount Sagiri is fundamentally different in this timeline. Without Nezuko to protect and save, Tanjiro's empathy for demons would be completely absent. Remember, in the original story, Tanjiro's kindness toward demons stems directly from Nezuko's existence, because he has to believe demons deserve mercy and can retain their humanity. This version of Tanjiro would be ruthless, and every demon he encounters would be nothing more than a monster that needs to be destroyed. Without Nezuko's assistance, the mission to fight the swamp demon would be far more difficult, and he'd take serious injuries that require extended recovery time. This delay means Tanjiro wouldn't travel to Asakusa or encounter Muzan and Tamayo at the same time as the original timeline. Even if he did, the meeting would be vastly different, because without Nezuko, Tamayo and Yushiro would have little interest in a low-ranked demon slayer. This means that Tamayo's anti-Muzan drug still wouldn't be developed in time, or at the very least would be significantly weaker without early research on Nezuko's unique blood. The Tsuzumi Mansion arc would still bring Tanjiro together with Zenitsu and Inosuke, but their dynamic would be completely different. Zenitsu would have no Nezuko to obsess over and protect, and Tanjiro wouldn't have the patience to deal with Inosuke's wild behavior, resulting in way more fighting and headbutting than the original story. The Mugen Train arc would see the three of them supporting Rengoku against Enmu. Tanjiro would awaken sun breathing in this timeline, because he doesn't really need Nezuko for that, so they successfully defeat the Lower Moon 1. Rengoku still dies in this timeline, and Tanjiro moves on to the Entertainment District arc. This is where the timeline begins to seriously diverge, because in canon, Nezuko's blood demon art saved Tengen, Tanjiro, and Inosuke from Gyutaro's deadly poison. Maybe Tanjiro manages to avoid that final hit from Gyutaro's blood sickle through his jaw in this timeline, but without Nezuko, Inosuke and Tengen would die unless Obanai arrived before the battle ended. So while the Demon Slayers still finish off the Upper Moon 6, their victory comes at a terrible cost, and losing Inosuke would devastate both Zenitsu and Tanjiro. Tanjiro channels his grief into even fiercer training, as he heads towards the Swordsmith village. Muichiro's battle remains the same in this arc, and he would still awaken his mark and defeat Gyoko. However, the battle against Hantengu would be far more difficult without Nezuko's assistance, and Mitsuri would take severe damage defending Tanjiro and the others before Zohakuten even emerges. However, Tanjiro would still manage to behead Hantengu's main body in the end, and this brings us to another interesting dilemma. Does Muzan attack the Demon Slayers? On the one hand, he needs to take action because his upper moons are dying, but he's not motivated by Nezuko's resistance to the sun like in the original timeline. This means that Muzan's attack is probably delayed more than it was in canon, giving the Demon Slayers more time to develop their skills during the Hashira training arc. By the time we reach the Infinity Castle, the Demon Slayers are in a dire situation. They've lost Inosuke, and Mitsuri is too heavily injured to take part in the battle. Meanwhile, Tamayo's anti-Muzan drug is significantly weaker without the head start from researching Nezuko's blood. And it's not only about time either. Tanjiro consistently sent blood from the 12 Kizuki to Tamayo to advance her research, which just doesn't happen in this timeline. The final battles would still be desperate struggles, and without Inosuke, Doma might actually survive until the sunrise countdown as well. And once all the Hashira gather outside, they'll be able to take out Doma easily as he's weakened by Shinobu's poison. But when the Demon Slayers finally face Muzan in the Sunrise Countdown, their forces are spread too thin, and the Demon King is stronger than he was in the original story. Muzan would survive the encounter and terrorize humanity for generations to come. But here's the most tragic part of this timeline. Even if by some miracle the Demon Slayers manage to defeat Muzan, Tanjiro would still lose. Remember, in canon, when Muzan turns Tanjiro into the new Demon King in a last-ditch effort to survive, it's Nezuko and Kanao who reach him and bring him back to humanity. In this timeline, if Muzan attempted the same desperate move, there would be no one to save Tanjiro, and the same rage that made him a Demon Slayer would turn him into the very thing he sought to destroy. All this hatred and pain would be unleashed on humanity, with no way to bring him back. So what did you think of these alternate timelines? Would the absence of Nezuko really break the entire Demon Slayer story? As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.